Wikipedia in the university classroom. We have a panel of us. Each of us is going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to take questions at the end. Some people are going to be talking about how students can edit Wikipedia. I've got a different focus in my presentation. I'm going to be addressing librarians and communication professionals in the university for saying how you can get information about your university out to the broader world. My name is Rasberry. I do Wikipedia at the University of Virginia. What I'm going to be talking about is how Wikidata can make the world aware of the research that's happening at your university, and you have the opportunity to share information in the Wikipedia platform to reach a very large audience. Show the world what you're doing. The kind of information that I'm going to be talking about sharing is the list of faculty at your university, their publications, different awards that people at your university have received, and your major research projects. What I'm going to be talking about is in 4 parts. How should people even understand universities? What is this vision that Wikidata and the Wikipedia platform has for universities? I'm going to say what kind of data we already have in the Wikipedia platform. What are the precedents? What's been going on the past few years? This concept of scholarly profiles. What is it that people are supposed to be understanding as readers? When you put this data in the Wiki platform, what are people going to see? And then we're going to review some social and ethical issues, which we already see arising. So how can the Wikipedia platform describe universities? This is a Wikidata conference, but Wikipedia is much more popular. When people think of universities and the Wiki platform, they think about Wikipedia articles. So there's this encyclopedic precedent where anything that's been written in third-party publications gets summarized in Wikipedia. These are extremely popular, often the most popular source of information about a university after the university's website itself. Practically all students and researchers who want to know about a university, they check the Wikipedia article. Not much connection with Wikidata right now. The most obvious connection is with the info boxes, which pull information from Wikidata, but that's going to change in the future. Increasingly, more information can come from Wikidata to describe universities. And we can tell stories, like what kind of faculty do you have at a university? What are the research projects happening? What are the trends in research? Some common questions that people have been asking recently is what universities are doing research on COVID. People also explore social issues, like how diverse are the faculty in a given university department. What we have to build on to describe universities is this project called WikiCite. It's been ongoing for, I guess, about 5 years now. And what WikiCite has done is imported citation metadata into the Wikipedia platform and associated this data with authors, associated it with the institutions where the authors are employed or affiliated. When I'm talking about citation metadata, I mean a citation. I've got one of these at the top. We have an author, we have a data publication, the title of a publication, and then we have a journal. So how does this become a university profile? Well, it's through other metadata. We know that the author is going to have certain university affiliations. They're going to have demographic characteristics that we can track. And we know the topic of the paper, or there's different ways of tagging this. Papers are in a certain field, they're history, economics, medicine, physics, what have you, more specific fields. And we can query papers in universities in Wikidata as a database to find out what's happening at a given university. Now, WikiCite, this publication records, this is a big part of the entire Wikidata project. It's the biggest single project within WikiCite.
Lane, I think
yes.
We're not seeing your slides for...
Have you ever seen them?
No. We saw them briefly when you were starting, and then they were loading. So maybe you want to give another... Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Thank you so much for telling me. So
there we go.
Yeah, we got a citation. This is the thing to know. So we got a citation. We're importing these into Wikidata, and it's the biggest part of the Wiki project. Now, when you have these citations in Wikidata, there's different ways to profile them at scale. You can use a scholarly profiling service. This isn't specific to Wikidata. This is something that a lot of platforms have. So some competing projects, some competing ways to get citation metadata are through Google Scholar. You can query by show me the publications by an author, show me the publications on a topic by a university. There's other products, Semantic Scholar. It's free in some ways, non-free data in other ways. Elsevier product, Clarivate Analytics makes Web of Science, Microsoft has a product. None of these are free like Wiki. There's all things that make these incompatible with Wiki. Just briefly, there's no export button on Google Scholar. If anyone tells you why can't I just use Google, there's no export. You can't reuse the data as you like. There's prices associated, costs associated with using these at your university. Some of these can be tens of thousands, over $100,000 for a yearly subscription. Many of these slurp up Wikipedia's content without attribution. Like, for example, Microsoft Academic, they stole a picture of our hamster off Wikipedia. No attribution for that. They just take data, reuse it. It's not aligned with Wiki's ethics. We have this profiling system. There's Wikidata. Within Wikidata, there's the WikiCite project collecting citation metadata. And then there's this tool, Scholia. I'm one of the contributors to this tool, which is the equivalent of like Google Scholar or any of these other things for profiling the data at scale. Some of the things that you can do is you type in the name of an author, you get their publication history, when did they publish, what did they publish, what is their list of papers. You can find out from their co-authors who do they collaborate with, which institutions are they collaborating with. So you get more information about where research is happening and who's involved in research in different fields. All this information is able to be better when we have more data in Wikidata. One of the major restrictions is so much data is non-free, non-open, but universities can contribute this data themselves. This doesn't have to be something that we pull in all with the Wiki community. Individual universities can contribute their own data for these kinds of things. And when they do that, we can get better profiles. I want to call out one project in particular. This project, which I coordinated, many other people contributed to this. Dozens of people contributed to this. Wiki Project Clinical Trials to pull in the United States government research directory catalog, clinicaltrials.gov, and try to associate these with universities. Now, this is medical research, which is a major research sector, but this applies to any kind of research. We could have pulled in a grants database from humanities research or whatever other kind of research catalogs there are. And we started indexing these in different ways. So we mapped these to the Wiki model, especially with a free and open data set that was curated by Duke University. I imported this into the Wiki system. Other universities did things like author disambiguation or connecting medical research papers to the original clinical trial records and then pointing those to when their staff researchers were involved in these projects. Vanderbilt University did a great job of that. And in Wikispirit, we have the Wiki community sorting these out with automated tools. And people who weren't necessarily involved so much were doing language translation to make this kind of medical research available to people all over the world in different languages. So there would never be prioritization to do this language translation in the universities alone or in the government alone, but Wiki is very big on equity and access to everybody. We try to coordinate these kinds of things in the Wiki community. What social and ethical issues come up when universities are contributing data, when we're starting to profile in Wiki, when we pull all these data sets in? Well, the big one that comes up whenever you're doing any database project, any technology project, the rich tend to benefit first. So if you want to just critique the entire field of machine learning, AI, data, the technology revolution, the rich benefit first. In Wiki, we can't solve this, but we can at least discuss the issue, organize global conversations, and start talking about these. Some other issues that I want to talk about is how we start to notice demographic trends in Wiki that perhaps universities would not want to talk about and many other organizations don't want to talk about. I'm going to show you that in a minute. Now, at the beginning, I said universities can upload their data to Wikidata. It's sort of promotionally to make sure that the world has access to their research. I'll still tell you that, but please be mindful. I know I said use Wikipedia for promotion. Also, don't use Wikipedia for promotion. Make sure you know what you're doing when you're uploading your data sets. Do it properly. Give us good linked data. Be mindful of Wikipedia ethics. So this is an opportunity, but respect the Wiki community of editors. Don't be a fool about this. Okay. Other issues that come up when we pull this information from data sources, there's some things you expect. We associate researchers with, say, ORCIDs, which is structured data that many libraries use to identify researchers. But in Wiki, we start to note other things like personal pronouns, things that we put inside Wikipedia biographies. And when you do that, you start to get demographic data. which has effects at scale. We get these from different places, so it's nice to uplift people who are underrepresented, who don't normally get the media attention for their accomplishments. There's certain groups that are more privileged in these ways. At the same time, we also raise vulnerability and bring up questions that perhaps people don't want to discuss so readily. We have a lot of projects in the Wiki platform that are applying demographic data to people, including scientists and people at universities. There's also external organizations which produce data sets that apply things like gender, ethnicity, LGBT status to people. This 500 QS is 500 queer scientists. These are people who are self-identifying as LGBT. We can pull that data into the Wikipedia platform and do queries like, say, what universities have LGBT scientists at them? That seems like a good thing, but there can be unintentional effects when you start to pull in this data, put it out in the open. Vanderbilt University, very bravely, I mentioned them earlier as people who are sorting out their medical research and clinical trials. They've also put gender tags on their staff. How will the world be different when we can query any university department and see the diversity along different demographic dimensions in that department? What about when we start querying funders? What demographics of people get access to grants or funding or resources? What fields are dominated by a particular demographic? Wikidata is going to surface this, and this perhaps isn't a conversation that many universities are ready to have, but we can have progress in this in Wiki. Thanks so much for hearing me out. Lots of contributors to this project. I've got links here. So Wiki community, number one, all the people who profile in WikiCite and the Scholia project. And special thanks to everyone who's contributed to that clinical trials project as a model for pulling in more research into the Wiki platform. Thanks so much.
Can everyone hear me? Just do an audio check. Okay, great. Sorry about that earlier. I was supposed to kick off the session. I just wanted to say thanks for your patience. Eliza, could I get the screen sharing feature because I have everyone else's presentation lined up? And also thank you, Lane, for going first. And thanks for everyone for vamping. You're wonderful. What a great group. Okay, so let's see. I think I can do this. Maybe? Ooh, preferences. Let's see, one more second.
Does it work?
Just allowing it.
Oh, great.
Okay, let me just do the other screen. Just kidding. Oh boy. These browsers are not wanting to work with me today. Well, I'll continue to work on this. I don't need slides for my little part. I just have some links for you, and I will get this to work for everyone else's presentation in the meantime. So hi, everybody. My name is Will Kent. I work at Wiki Education, and I do a lot of Wikidata outreach, and I just want to highlight some of the most recent Wikidata in the classroom projects that I've worked on. I do teach Wikidata courses, but they're not in a classroom like this session is addressing. So some recent things that I've interacted with, some research projects, and some really compelling Wikidata projects are at the university, Michigan State University. I've been doing some speaking engagements with a program called Graphic Possibilities, which does a lot of work in the digital humanities around comic book collection and representing comic book data as linked data. And this is a link to their site, and they've got some really beautiful Wikidata visualizations. If you click the link at the top of that link that I just sent you for the visualization gallery, they have a lot of really great Wikidata visualizations built off of their comic book data database, and we've done a couple of Wikidata edit-a-thon events together, basically bringing everyone up to speed, talking about data modeling, and then sharing out some of the findings in the broader community. We've had 3 sessions together, and over those 3 sessions, they've generated over 7,000 Wikidata items, either created new ones or edited existing ones, which is really impressive for a lot of newcomers just getting oriented to Wikidata, which is pretty cool. The data set is also linked from that webpage if you're interested. There's a whole GitHub repository, and I would keep an eye on them. They're doing some really exciting work. I also worked with Lane at the University of Virginia with a set of his students for a capstone project in the data science program. And there, these students and I were in a small group, and they downloaded the whole set of Wikidata and ran it through some machine learning programs to extract some useful information about taxonomy and hierarchies on Wikidata. And it resulted in this cool research paper called Context Matrix Methods for Property and Structure Ontology Completion in Wikidata. It rolls right off the tongue, and it means that they used some machine learning tools to better anticipate the classification of items on Wikidata. So kind of like a reverse Recoin, if you're familiar with that tool. And the whole idea is to better organize the location of things within Wikidata itself. And that second link is a link to their research paper that was a result of this course that I worked on for the fall and the spring of 2020 and 2021. And then another really inspirational speaking engagement that happened was at the Summer Institute in Computational Social Science, hosted by Howard University, and this is a link to that meeting, which is focused on HBCUs, historically Black universities and colleges in the United States. And they had me speak, sharing some information about Wikidata for a research project with these students. And although there's no project off the ground yet, it was a great moment of exposure for Wikidata to kind of show all of these students that Wikidata could be used for a project, for a data set, and have them interact with it moving forward. So this was a great opportunity to kind of get Wikidata in front of a new population of students, of professors, of researchers who can use Wikidata for their work. And that was a very fun opportunity, and I think very urgent, just because it can immediately start to engage with issues of representation on Wikidata, and it also brings Wikidata to a whole new audience. And I also did some really great work with Stacy Allison-Cassin on the call with her students, and I'll let her talk more about that. But first, let me try to resolve this screen sharing issue I've got now. Or maybe I can just pass it off, or Eliza can pass it off to who's next. I think Stacy, you're next by the schedule.
Yeah, I'm next. Did you want me to try and share my slides? Because
Yes,
I had issues yesterday trying to do this, and so I feel nervous.
I've given you the rights, so.
Okay. Okay.
Bottom left corner on the plus.
I think it was. Having a code, one could not share a screen, different browser.
Do you have the presentation also as PDF or PowerPoint?
I just have it as Google Slides. I can try and do that, but maybe someone else should start then while I take care of that.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
I think we'll all be coming up against the slide sharing challenge.
So let me then just download it real quick as a PDF.
And I'll go ahead and do the same for ours, Amy.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Stacy and I can race PDFs, and then whoever gets it first.
I think I've got it. Let me see. Okay. It's like how to feel like super technologically challenged.
Great. And then you can just upload it maybe on manage presentation. You can upload it, and then you see the chat, you see everyone.
I see. Okay. Okay. Never mind this then. I don't want to do that. Sorry, where is the upload? I'm sorry, everybody.
Is again on the plus. Bottom left corner plus should be called manage presentation, something like that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's not so easy.
And is there any way that I can try to do that ahead of time as well, or can only one of us have the power to upload slides at a time?
Yeah, I'm sorry, only one person at a time.
Okay.
That's the
Sorry.
limitation of the glue button. Is it working, Stacy? Or
I'm just trying to, now I'm trying to find where it downloaded. Sorry, this is so awkward. I'm really sorry, everybody.
I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I can talk while that's going. Why don't I just do that? So, as Will mentioned, he did come to, oh, there we go. Okay, it's doing something. So that's, these slides better be worth it, right? Okay, so here we are. I have slides. So, just to let people know who I am. So I'm Stacy Allison-Cassin. I'm an assistant professor in the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto, where I teach in the Library and Information Studies program. I've been at U of T for just about 1 year. And before that, I was an associate librarian at York University, and I'm actually just on leave from that position. And I want to cover very, very quickly this assignment that I created for the class that I teach. That is called Representing, Accessing, and Documenting the Cultural Record. And this course is a required course in the Library and Information Studies program. So it's a graduate level course. All library studies students need to take this course, although we do have students who take it who are in archives and record management or museum studies. And I won't read all of this out, but the main goal of the class is to acquaint students with the practice and theory of representing and documenting culture. So when we talk about the cultural record, that really means things produced by humans. So not just things we might find in a library, but really just all kinds of things. And it's first year course, so often students are coming to this course without having had a lot of other experience. Again, I won't read all of these course learning outcomes, but you can see some off the top is to identify a range of approaches to the representation and documentation of cultural records, and thinking about some standard approaches to the documentation of cultural records, and then also sort of the theory of cultural record documentation. So when thinking about this course, so I taught this course in January 2021, and I'm teaching this course now. Both semesters have been fully online, except I do have one in-person tutorial for this class. And it seemed to me that Wikidata would be a good platform for the development of a project that is focused on theories and approaches to documentation, because it gives students an opportunity to actually apply the theory and practices that they are learning through the course. The project, I have 4 elements of that project. So it's scaffolded in that it happens throughout the term. And the first part is a project plan. And this is so that students articulate what they are going to do, the timeline for their project, how they're going to approach their work. And I do have them following a template for that, because also I think as many of us know that at some point you're going to have to write a project plan for something. So it's just good practice. And then different elements as well, reporting on what they've created. This semester, I'm having students do a very brief presentation because we have tutorial sessions, and then a final critical paper where they take the work that they did creating their Wikidata items and then contextualize that in a critical way that brings in course readings or other readings that they had. So we have this sort of arc where students are building up their knowledge and then take everything they learned in the course and bring it into that final paper. I already was speaking to some of these things, but really for me, the heart of it is being able to both create the documentation of cultural objects, but also critically reflect on the things we're talking about in class. So one that students have engaged with is we read about challenges or issues with the documentation of gender in library cataloging practice, for example, and then students have found on their own that this is an issue in Wikidata, and then they can connect the things they learn in their readings or learn in thinking about parts of the course, or learning about the sort of ideological basis of all information systems, and bringing that into thinking about the work that they had to do in their project. So I did have students make their own choices about what they wanted to work on. So instead of having a ready-made data set, students chose the area that they wanted to work on. The first time I ran the course, these were the thematic areas. I've made some slight changes for this term, and that was intentional in that I wanted students to also enjoy this course because it's required. It's like the cataloging type course, and I always feel like everyone gets grumpy about having to take a cataloging or metadata type course. But also I think that it's important to have students also document something that they care about. I think that has made a difference for students. And then again, to me, it's about this, there's for me an intentionality about that, because we also talk about the affective or the emotional part of doing documentation work is something I don't think we talk very much about, but it is part of the practice. And so thinking about how students experience that documentation was also something that we ended up talking about, and is again intentionally there as part of the assignment design. I don't want to stress this too much. I will try and post my slides somewhere, but the project was actually quite small, so they only have to create 5 Wikidata items. It seems, I think, for some students quite daunting at the beginning, but it's really quite constrained because, again, the intention is not that students are producing a lot of Wikidata things. It's more that action or thinking about what it means to document in practice. These are our winter 2020 statistics. We did use the dashboard. We know that the dashboard isn't always super accurate, I think, for Wikidata. But I had, as you see here, 94 students on the dashboard. I do want to mention that students also had a choice to not use Wikidata for their project if they didn't want to. So people were not forced to create a Wikidata user account and do work here. There was an alternate project, so this isn't all of the students. Next slide. Oh, there, sorry. Briefly, challenges. So going from like 0 to creating items in Wikidata was a challenge for some students if they've never thought about Wikidata before. And again, we're online, so that was a challenge. Some thematic areas didn't work very well because they were not as well articulated in Wikidata. So I had thought food would be fun, but actually food just ended up being challenging and hard to do. So that was something that I was not as prepared for as an instructor. Some items requiring a lot of dependencies, which we would know, but students did have to change what they were doing. And some students had items deleted, which was unexpected for me, and hopefully I've mitigated that somewhat in this iteration. But we've had a few incidents of this happening, and I have some thoughts on that. Maybe we can pick up later. But positives overall, I think it went really well. Fun and enjoyable, I think, and thoughtful for students. I was so impressed with the critical reflections at the end. And I do really think it helped connect our course readings and course materials with being able to practice these skills in an environment that's actually pretty safe and is real. Students can't really go in and create metadata records in most library repositories or in library catalogs, but here students can go and do this work, and there's actually some nice features of Wikidata that are helpful in the educational context, like constraint violations. Really, really helpful in showing someone, hey, there's something wrong with your thing that you did. Can you figure it out what it is? And so those little markers of, oh, you did something here isn't right, really help students go and do that troubleshooting or think about why is there this problem. So some of those problems are technical and some of those problems are with the data model, but really help students also go from this idea of being able to see something that they think they know, like a book, and trying to transform that idea that they have of their book into data, because we know that is actually takes some, like, your brain doesn't always articulate things that way. So being able to understand that transformation for me was another really valuable part of doing that work in Wikidata. And so thank you. Hopefully we have some time for questions at the end. But thanks so much. And I think I can stop sharing.
Wonderful, thank you. And hello, my name is Amanda Rust. I think we are next in the queue. So if I could just ask that I now get the special sharing permissions, and I'll try to upload.
You have them
real quick. All right, wonderful. And there's the plus. You can all watch my face while I do the really exciting moving around of things. Claims to be uploading. And while it says it's converting and processing, so I'm going to assume, oh, great, things are happening. Are folks seeing slides?
I see them.
They are. Excellent. And thank you so much to my co-panelists. I feel like you suffered through all of the technological barriers, and I watched and learned. So the benefit of going last. I'm presenting with my colleague, Amy Ruskin. And Amy, I'll just keep these up and you just tell me to forward whenever you need. I think that'll be easiest. All right, excellent. So hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Rust. I use she, her pronouns. I work in the Digital Scholarship Group, which is in the Northeastern University Library. Northeastern is in Boston, Massachusetts, in the US, in the Northeast US. And Amy Ruskin is our data engineer, and she will be talking more later. Right now, though, we're going to talk about how Wikidata fits into an initiative to collaboratively document public art in Boston's neighborhoods. And I'm already looking at listening to Stacy. I was like, yes, and when we're ready, we're going to contact our local LIS school friends and see if they want to also participate. We'll get more into this, but the focus really is on neighborhood public art, particularly spaces outside of the more sort of typically visited areas in Boston, which are largely downtown and the Common and Back Bay. And Amy and I will talk about the process of setting up the project in Wikidata, determining data models, creating a wiki project page. That's all Amy, and our hopes for future classroom use. So this is a little bit of our hopes and dreams here as well that we're sharing with you. Excuse me. So the first thing to know is that this is part of the Boston Research Center, and that matters because the BRC is a digital community history and archives lab based in our library. I'm currently the project director. And I think the thing to know here for context is that, one, it rests on the long work of our university archives and special collections, which have built collections and partnerships with social justice and Boston area social service organizations for a really long time. And so I think of us as tech support for that local history, right? We are adding infrastructure and support around historical data and computational archives methods. And the other thing to know, I think that's helpful to know about Boston for context, is particularly the name Neighborhood Public Art. So hopefully you can see a little bit there, two maps of Boston here. The one to the left is from one of our big city planning departments. And the one to the right is a larger rectangle that is sort of that gray rectangle pulled out and blown up. So the stuff in that rectangle is, if you are familiar with Boston, which you might not be, but if you see it in often in the news or in movies or in guidebooks and tourist guides, right? It's all the stuff in that little tiny square, that little rectangle. So when we say in the neighborhoods in Boston, it's kind of a code in a way for saying outside of downtown, outside of the financial district, outside of Back Bay, which are the more commonly visited areas. So the neighborhoods are all those other places to the sort of south and what are my directions? West, coming out of that. And many of these neighborhoods, not all, but many, have been historically marginalized and have not received the same kind of investment generally, and particularly the same kind of investment in public art that the downtown areas have received. So this is changing, particularly in the last 10 to 20 years, but that does not make up for long-term recurring disinvestment. So our team, the BRC team, is not the only group in the city interested in this topic. We're relatively recent to the conversation. We actually started this this project through work with a donor to our special collections who has been interested, this donor, in tracking public art and data about it for more than a decade in Boston. So she herself has been sort of working on this. Other universities are working on this, nonprofits are thinking about this, and really all with the goal of gathering the data to work towards a more equitable city and celebrating art and artists in our neighborhoods. So in talking to different partners about who might have done this, who has some info, who has some data, you can see the sort of panoply of logos that I'm presenting in front of you to give you a sense of the different kinds of groups that are already doing this. And again, we're not the only one. Public libraries, some nonprofits like Artists for Humanity and Down There, Boston Art Commission, the city itself, other colleges, the city archives, the public libraries, right? Lots of different groups have a piece of information about this and have been doing their own work. So we found, in terms of building partnerships, that no one repository of images or data or information was the right answer. Centralizing all of this energy and work in just one place was not possible or desirable, right? Many folks are doing their own projects. They want to be able to do their own thing and focus on what is important to them. And I'm sure even in this slide, I'm missing a lot of key repositories. So we have a lot of energy around neighborhood public art, and figuring out Northeastern's role in that was a little bit challenging, and I bet you can imagine where I'm going with this, we figured that our role could be around facilitating the standardization and aggregation of this information in a third space where everyone can modify and publicly contribute info, right? So if only there is a separate multilingual global place where people can share this kind of information without any one group exhibiting too much power or control over it. So this practically also gives us, meeting folks at Northeastern and everyone else, an open data store where we or our students or other folks can use the public art data to come up with additional tools. So long term, our group, like I said, we have some infrastructure support. We want to help create local walking tours, but we can make sure that the data layer is all shared in a local and accessible place. So now I'm going to turn it over to Amy to give more details about the project itself. And Amy, just let me know when you want me to forward slides.
Okay, great. So yeah, why Wikidata? I don't think this audience needs any convincing. And so Amanda's already covered some of this. But yeah, so on the more technical side, obviously we have the structural capabilities of Wikidata, which let us capture more complex information than we could in just spreadsheets and offers more flexibility than, say, a relational database. And in particular for works of public art, you might have statues that have moved and would thus have like multiple locations with different start and end dates. You might have conflicting or uncertain information about installation dates, all the sorts of things that you can handle pretty well in Wikidata with statements and qualifiers and references and all that. It also lets us take advantage of work that's already been done in Wikidata so that we can link to existing items and build up this connected world of knowledge about Boston public art. So not just the works and their artists, but also the art schools that people went to, the activist organizations they participated in, and more. The visualization tools bundled with the Wikidata query service make it easy to get maps and graphs and charts right off the bat that we could show to potential partners as proof of concept, even though we do eventually want to build our own tools to do a bit more. And again, the major reason is to invite larger community participation in the project. So rather than having everything in a database that only we can access and edit, putting it into Wikidata is a way of sharing it more widely for people to reuse however they want, and also inviting people to contribute and enrich what we have with what they know. So next slide. Yeah, so I was just going to highlight some of the steps involved with getting started with a Wikidata project, at least based on our experience so far. So the most important thing was just deciding on our initial data models. So looking at the data we already had and figuring out what the different types of entities we want to add to Wikidata are based on that. So we focused on works of art and individual artists. Someone else approaching this project might decide to set up, distinct models for murals versus sculptures versus commemorative plaques. But for us, we didn't need quite that level of granularity. We then looked at how those entities were already being modeled in Wikidata by performing some exploratory queries, searching for relevant wiki projects. So there was already a public art wiki project, and their data model seemed reasonable. So we've mostly been following that. We created a mapping between columns we already had in spreadsheets and Wikidata properties, cleaned and merged everything, and did some initial bulk uploads of items via the Wikidata extension for OpenRefine. And then we started the Neighborhood Public Art in Boston Wiki project page to document our models, track what we've uploaded so far, and outline tasks that still need to be completed. And so as we go through this, I'm going to move as much of our workflow documentation onto that project page rather than just having it all on an internal Google Drive, so that we're making our process transparent and inviting feedback, hopefully. And another advantage of starting a wiki project page is that you can create an item for that project in Wikidata, tag other items as being on that project's focus list, and then do build queries around that. Use the recent changes tool to patrol for vandalism based on that. Yeah, so next slide. Well, okay, sorry, next. Yeah. Right, so I was going to do a show and tell with external links, but given the sharing situation, that's not happening. But yeah, so I guess Amanda's included the link to this in the chat, but I just wanted to quickly share our project page. Just to note, we have an initial list of tasks for potential contributors, resources for researching public art in Boston. I've been working on adding bibliographic resources as well. On the discussion tab, a lot of unanswered questions. So I would love for people to go in and add to that at some point. and some example queries. In the data model tab, we have the list of recommended properties to include for different types of entities. And then we have the list of works and artists currently on our focus list. So some of these might have already existed in Wikidata, but mostly they're things we've been adding in the past few months. Next slide. Yeah, so that's just a screenshot of the map. I think it's worth going to the live link if you can. And so we do actually have more works than that, but not all of them have coordinates yet. Next slide. And yeah, that's a screenshot of the network visualization of the connections between all the items on our focus list. And I definitely recommend playing around with that and seeing the interesting little clusters that emerge. I'm really hoping this will inspire some further research into like artist collaborations or comparing the like types of works produced under different funding schemes. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so I'll try to go through this quickly. So some of the challenges we've run into so far, and I'm hoping some people here have answers. So one of the major ones, we initially thought that because these are works of art in public spaces, we could just upload a bunch of photos to Wikimedia Commons and link them via the image property in Wikidata. And if we were in Canada, maybe we could, but the US copyright law is more restrictive, and works installed prior to 1978 are probably public domain, but later works wouldn't be. And we're mostly interested in the later works. So that's a whole thing, and we need to figure out how to connect our Wikidata items to images of works if we can't host those images in Commons. I think if we have the photos hosted elsewhere, we could use like P6500 for non-free artwork image URL, but I'm not totally sure if that's the best way to go about it or what. Citing our sources, yeah, the spreadsheets we were initially working from are sort of archival material, but they haven't been processed yet. So we can't quite reference those, and some of the information can only be verified, you know, might only exist in internal memos or flyers or other materials that we can't really point to. Yeah, specific public art modeling questions, spotting and dealing with vandalism, which I'm sure many other projects have faced, and just the question of how do we get people interested, willing, and able to contribute. And yeah, I think that's back to Amanda.
Yeah, and I'll wrap this up here. You know, I think a lot of folks here have as much or more experience with us with this long term. So, you know, we're definitely hoping to look into collaborations with the public libraries around Wikidata-a-thons, and really focusing on connections between Wikidata items and archival items with us and some of our projects, and eventually using our own developer team to create some different kinds of visualizations, particularly in partnership with some of our external partners, right? So we could work with an arts nonprofit to create visualizations that serve what that arts nonprofit is looking for. And finally, with classroom activities, again, our hopes and dreams, but what I really like about the potential here is that I think Wikidata allows us to create very specific research assignments within the domain of public art. So we could say, you know, here are 5 pieces, track down their exact installation date, see if you can find out whether they moved, see if you can find out the funding source. And it lets you have a lot of sort of conversation specific to arts documentation. So there's work in the field. It's also a way to focus on local history. A lot of our students at Northeastern are not from the area. And so we're always looking for ways to get them exposed to local history. And Stacy already talked about this, I think, quite nicely, but it also gives the opportunity to, in a class, talk about the transition from unstructured to structured data. So you have, 5 archival documents in front of them. One is a handwritten letter, one is a typed piece of information from the city, and another one is a spreadsheet that the Parks Department gave to us. How do you sort of bring those all into an overarching sort of structured form of data? And that's a really interesting transition for students. So we're going to end there, and we have a couple of minutes for questions. And so thank you, everyone, for coming, and thanks also to our panelists. I will mute myself now. Or maybe leave it on. Yeah, if anyone has questions, let us know in the chat. And there was some interesting chat too about copyright info. Stacy was updating us on some not exciting developments.
I was complaining
Canada,
in the chat.
Exciting developments from Canada.
Well, I mean, that's totally an aside, but Canada's faced a lot of pressure from the US for a long time about our more expensive public domain period. And finally, in the most recent iteration of what was NAFTA, and now is like some not as easy acronym, that pressure was successful. And so I think it's going to have definitely going to have an impact on cultural heritage.
So I will apologize once again on behalf of the United States for some of the many things that we
No apologies.
And I see an interesting question in the chat around data modeling. For public art, that's just all Amy. Or I think for different projects generally, sorry, I'm applying it to public art because it mentioned VRA, but yeah, whether people are looking at other standards like VRA. I know Amy did a scan, but I think because there was an active wiki or a reasonably active Wikidata project, we went with that, but I don't want to speak entirely for Amy.
Yeah, I think I mostly just followed the wiki project public art because I don't know. It's like, well, if there's this community here already doing this, let's do it that way. But